Hello, I hope you find this story interesting. Your feedback and subscription are always welcome. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not that my wife cheated. It's that I didn't realize how deep it went. I lived half my life thinking that my life was normal, even good. Not perfect, but who has it easy now? I am 58 years old, an ordinary man without excessive ambitions, but not without character. I worked all my life, paid the mortgage, repaired my car, and barbecued on weekends. I lived like millions of men like me. I had a wife. Linda, we have been together for over 30 years. Hey, it's not even just a love or a habit anymore, it's a part of me. It seemed like she would always be there for me. And I had a brother, Jack. 3 years younger, confident, smart. Hey, he always knew how to find a way to make a profit. He was always spinning everyone. Who wanted a new business? Jack. Who could convince anyone? Jack. I'm used to him taking what he wants. But I never thought he would want my wife. Or maybe I was just turning a blind eye. It all started with little things. Things that don't seem to matter, but leave a mark. I noticed that Linda was spending more time on her phone, and she always had it with her, even in the bathroom. This had never happened before. At first I didn't pay attention, but then she started going out more often, with her friends. She started dressing brighter. So what? I thought, people change. But one day she came home late, and the smell on her was, not her perfume, it was a man's scent. An expensive one. Not mine. I asked him, where have you been? She's smiling. I had a few drinks with the girls, don't worry. And I didn't worry. I was a fool. Everything changed that night when I accidentally woke up. It was about 3 in the morning. I went to the kitchen to drink water and saw the light from the living room. Linda was sitting on the couch, leaning over the phone. In the darkness, her face glowed on the screen. She was writing something, smiling. I pretended not to see, but a worm of doubt lodged in my mind. In the morning, when she went to the shower, I took her phone. There was a password. There was no password before. This was enough to realize that something was wrong. I couldn't just let it go. The next day, when Linda went to the store, I sat down at her laptop. It wasn't locked. Flipping through the browser history, I came across the deleted tab, but there was something left. Requests for hotels, for gifts, and one more thing, a route in the navigator that she had recently built. I memorized the address. I took a day off and went there. It was an expensive hotel in the center. I stood at the entrance like an idiot, not knowing what to do next. And then I saw them. Linda was walking across the hall. She was laughing. Jack was behind her. My wife, they looked happy. My wife and my brother, it was like being punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. It was like I was pulled out of my own life and thrown into somebody else's movie. I returned home, waiting for Linda. She came in late, dressed in the same outfit she wore at the hotel. I met her in the hallway. "How are your friends?" I asked. She answered without hesitation, "Everything is fine. We had a great time." And I realized she was lying. And it was no accident. It was something more. I had 2 options: make a scandal and force her to confess. Pretend to know nothing and find out more. I chose the second option, and that decision changed everything. I thought I was ready for the truth. But, damn it, if someone had told me that it would hurt so much, I would never have climbed into that pit. But there was no turning back. I pretended I didn't know anything. It was hard, superhumanly hard. But I needed more proof. I wanted not just to catch Linda in a lie, but to understand how long it had been going on, how far had gone. I started my investigation. The next day I felt shattered, as if I had woken up in someone else's life. Linda behaved as usual. She smiled, asked me what to cook for dinner, and I sat there listening to her voice, think you were there. With him. You lied to my face. I couldn't wait any longer. When she went to take a shower, I picked up her phone again. This time I decided to act differently. I found the contact list. I opened Jack's number. It wasn't signed with his name. It was just the letter. D. Aka. This confirmed my suspicions. I couldn't open their messages, everything was deleted. But the call history remained. She called him every day, several times a day. Long conversations. Long conversations. I decided that wasn't enough. I needed more evidence. I did something I had never expected myself to do. I started spying on my own wife. On Saturday, Linda said she was going to the mall. I nodded and didn't object. But as soon as she closed the door behind her, I quickly put on my jacket, got in the car, and followed. She really did go to the mall. She went inside. I waited for about 15 minutes, then followed her in. And I saw that she was not making any purchases. She was just standing at the entrance as if she was waiting for someone. And then he appeared. Jack, my brother. He walked up to her, and I saw something that made my legs go weak. The way he hugged her. The way you hug a lover, not friends, not relatives, loved ones. And she responded in kind. I was frozen in place. Everything inside me was screaming, "Go! Hit him! Make a scandal!" But I couldn't. No, I just stood there and watched. They left the mall, got into Jack's car, and drove away. I went to my car and followed. My hands were shaking. My breathing was labored. I was shaking with anger. Then they arrived at the same hotel as the last time. I stopped a little further away so that I wouldn't be noticed. I watched them go inside. Together, Linda was holding his hand, and he was looking at her in a way I hadn't seen in years. If there was any doubt left, it was gone now. I returned home. I sat in the darkness, listened to the silence, and tried to understand what now. What to do. I couldn't just explode and break down. I knew that if I did it wrong, they would find a way to justify themselves. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I decided to wait. I decided to do everything smart. But I didn't know that things would get even worse. Have you ever caught yourself thinking that you would rather not know the truth? That sometimes a sweet lie is better than what's really going on behind your back. I knew Linda was cheating on me. I knew it had been going on for a long time. I knew that my own brother, the man I grew up with, had become my enemy. But I didn't know the most important thing. And when I found out, I would rather be blind and deaf than hear those words. The next morning I couldn't stand it any longer. Linda was making coffee as if nothing had happened. I stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at her, and felt myself tearing up inside. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. How long has this been going on? She froze, slowly turned her head in my direction. What are you talking about? Don't pretend, Linda. You're my brother, too. How long has this been going on? Her face changed. Her eyes were darting. Her hands were shaking. She opened her mouth to say something, but I interrupted in "Don't lie." She remained silent. I took a step forward. How much silence? A month. 6 months. Silence. A year. Linda pursed her lips and lowered her head. No more. I felt as if I had hit the ground after falling from a high-rise building. How long, Linda? She didn't look at me. And then I heard something that made me stagger. And, 10 years, 10 years. They'd been together for 10 years. While I paid for our house, while I thought we had a strong family, while I lived in an illusion. 10 years. I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. How? Well, I whispered. I didn't mean for this to happen. Are you kidding me? 10 years, Linda. I was out of control. 10 years you came home, looked me in the eye, and lied to me. You slept with him. My brother. It's not that simple. How do you think it is? Linda started to cry. I didn't care. But it wasn't over yet, because a minute later she said something else. Or Jack wanted to tell you. What? She put her hands over her face. Or we took out a loan. I froze. Lea, what loan? Or a few years ago. He said it was for business. We used your house as collateral. My breath caught in my throat. What? He said he'd pay us back quickly. Linda, do you even know what you're saying? She didn't say anything. But I already knew. The house I'd paid for my whole life. The house I thought I'd grow old in. They mortgaged it for a loan I didn't even know about. And now I have nothing. I felt empty. I wanted to scream, hit, and destroy everything around me. But I just left the house. I got in the car and drove away. Where did you go? I didn't know, but I knew it wasn't over yet. I was driving without a goal. The Anihi Road was opening up in front of me like a black hole, and I didn't care where it would lead me. My head was throbbing with thoughts. 10 years of betrayal. A mortgaged house. A brother who turned into an enemy. A wife who ruined my life. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers were numb, and then I realized there is no turning back. This is the end. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to answer it. But when I saw the name on the screen, my heart sank. Jack, my brother. I pulled over to the side of the road. The green button. What do you want? He sounded nervous. You already know. Did you think she'd lie forever? Silence. I could only hear his breathing. Listen. He finally spoke. It's not like you think. Oh, really? I laughed, bitterly, coldly. So maybe you can explain what it really is? I didn't mean for it to happen this way. You didn't. My eyes darkened. You slept with my wife for 10 years. You mortgaged my house. And now you say you didn't mean to. Jack was silent. You took everything from me, brother. I hissed. That's not true. Do you realize that I'm homeless? That the bank can take the house? I'll get it all back. He muttered. How? Your bank. There was silence again. And then he said something that made me shudder. I love her. I almost laughed. Do you do? Yes. Did you think about me? I didn't want you to find out like this. What did you want? To find you in our bed. Jack sighed heavily. We need to talk. I clicked my tongue. You want to talk after you destroyed everything. I'll make sure you don't lose your house. And how will you do that? Silence. I exhaled. You've lost everything, Jack. You're broke, and so am I. Give me time. Time. And I laughed again. I don't have time, and I don't have a brother anymore. I passed out. I came home a few hours later. Linda was sitting on the couch, crying. I walked past her without even looking in her direction. I went to the bedroom, opened the closet, took out my suitcase. I started packing. What are you doing? Her voice was trembling. I'm leaving. Where are you going? Away from you? Linda ran to me. Bobby, please. And I turned around. What, Linda? What do you want to tell me? That you're sorry? She bit her lip. What? I didn't mean to lie to you. I looked her straight in the eye. But she was lying. She started crying. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger, just emptiness. I closed my suitcase and took a deep breath. The house was silent, and I could only hear Linda clenching her fist. But I didn't care anymore. I was leaving. From a broken marriage. From under a roof that no longer belonged to me. From the woman who had cheated on me with my brother. I headed for the door, but she grabbed my arm. Don't go. I slowly turned to her. Why? She wiped away her tears and suddenly raised her head with an expression that made me cringe. She was no longer crying. Her eyes became cold. If you leave, if you will lose everything. I shuddered. And what did you say? Linda crossed her arms over her chest. If you leave now, I'll make sure you have nothing at all. I laughed. Linda, are you crazy? I already have nothing. She looked me straight in the eye. Do you think this is the end? And then I realized. It was just the beginning. I slowly put the suitcase on the floor. Go ahead. Linda ran a nervous hand through her hair. Jack owes a lot of money. I already knew that. Not all of it. She paused. And he borrowed from people he'd rather not owe anything to. I felt a chill run down my spine. What are you saying? And they will come for him. And not I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? Who, Bobby? They know about you? I stepped closer. Goddamn it, Linda, are you telling me I'm in on this now? She nodded silently. A wave of rage washed over me. Are you kidding me? If only. I turned around and paced the room. How much? Oh, what? How much does he owe? Linda looked down. Over 100,000. I froze. How much? 100,000, Bobby. I felt sick. I sat down on the couch and grabbed my head. So you're saying that my brother owes 100,000 to criminals and they can come after me? That's right. Great, just great. I closed my eyes. I had to think. But how can you think when everything is going to hell? And what do you suggest? I finally asked. Linda sat down next to me. I can help. I felt myself twitch a help. You. She have money. I grimaced. Where? It doesn't matter. What do you mean? It doesn't matter. She looked at me with her big, innocent eyes. Just know that I can solve it. I narrowed my eyes suspiciously. And what's the price? She ran her finger down my arm. We will forget about everything. I couldn't believe my ears. Are you serious? She smiled. Yes. You want me to stay here, pretend like nothing happened, and accept money from a woman who betrayed me for 10 years? If you want to survive. I felt the blood boil in my veins. You're playing dirty, Linda. It's a game, Bobby. And then it was either you or you. I had to make a choice, to accept Linda's help or to be left with no money, no home and debts that could cost me my life. I didn't sleep the whole night. My mind was racing. 100,000 in debt, my wife's infidelity, a ruined marriage, and Linda who had offered me a deal. I could take her money, pay off my debts, and keep a roof over my head. But I knew that if I did, she would win. I would become weak. I would become what she wanted me to be, a weak-willed man who forgives everything for money, and I couldn't let that happen. I made a decision. I'm leaving. I'd rather be left with nothing than live with this woman for one more day. Early in the morning I packed my things and headed for the door. Linda did not stop me. She just stood on the threshold with her arms folded across her chest and looked at me with a strange smile. I didn't understand what she was up to, but I knew it wasn't over. As soon as I stepped outside, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message. It was from Jack. One sentencing. I am done. I froze. What does that mean? I tried to call back out of range. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I arrived at his place half an hour later. The door was open. It was dark and silent inside. Jack. No one answered. I went into the living room. It was empty. On the table was an unfinished bottle of whiskey and some papers on the floor. I bent down and picked up one of them. And my heart pounded. Documents for his house, with the bank's seal, confiscated for debt. I bit my lip. Jack had lost everything. But where was he? I moved further into the house. I heard a noise in the bathroom. I opened the door and froze. Jack was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. He looked like a ghost. His eyes were red, and there was a handful of pills on the table next to him. Bobby. His voice was barely audible. What have you done? I fell to my knees and grabbed his shoulders. "Are you crazy?" He smiled slightly. "It doesn't matter anymore." I pulled out my phone. "I'll call an ambulance." He grabbed my arm sharply. "Don't." Shut up," and I was trembling with anger. I dialed the number. "I'm overdosing. I need help." I heard the operator say something, but I could hardly understand the words. Jack was already losing consciousness. I was shaking him, screaming. Hold on, you hear me?" He mumbled something. One phrase. I didn't understand it at first, but then it was like an electric shock. She knew. I froze. Who knew? His eyes closed. And at that moment there was a knock on the door. An ambulance. Jack was saved. The doctors said that a little longer and it would have been too late. I sat in the hospital corridor, staring at the wall. His last words kept replaying in my head. She knew. Who? Linda. I jumped to my feet. God damn it, if that was true. My phone vibrated again. A message from her. "Now you know what to do." I broke out in a cold sweat. I realized she was manipulating me. She knew about Jack's depths. She knew he would break. And she knew I wouldn't leave him. She made me stay. I clenched my fists. This is all her game. But I don't want to play anymore. I stood in the hospital corridor, staring at the message from Linda. "No, you know what to do." I was shaking with anger. What was she up to? If she really knew about Jack's debts, if she was using that to get me to stay, then this wasn't just manipulation, it's something worse. But why? What does she want from me? And then I had a thought. What if I'm not the one she wants to keep under control? What if this whole game is not for me? What if the real target is Jack? I went to Jack's room. He looked terrible, pale, exhausted, but conscious. I sat down next to him and took a deep breath. "Listen, I have to ask." Jack shook his head. "No, don't." "I already know what you mean." I narrowed my eyes. How do you know?" He winced. "Linda was here." I froze. What?" On a half an hour ago." My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. What did swallowed hard? She said she'd fix it, that she'd help me with my debts. I clenched my fists. "And you believed her?" Jack smiled. No, I didn't. But she did say something interesting." I leaned closer. "What did she say?" He looked up at me with tired eyes. That it was not over yet." I did not have time to answer, because at that moment the door opened. A tall man in an expensive suit stood on the threshold. A stranger. He looked at me carefully, then turned his gaze to Jack. "At last we meet, Mr. Richardson." I flinched. Who is he? I stood up and blocked Jack's view. Who are you?" The man smiled. My name is William Carter. I represent some people your brother owes money to." I felt a chill run down my spine. Jack raised his head sharply. "I'll pay you back, just give me time." Carter held up a hand. Time is a luxury, Mr. Richardson. But you do have an option." I caught his gaze. What option?" He pulled an envelope from his pocket and tossed it on the bedside table. "All you have to do is agree to one small favor." I was wary. What kind of favor?" Carter leaned closer. "You have to do what Linda asks." I felt like I'd been electrocuted. What?" Carter smiled. "She's a very powerful woman, Mr. Richardson. She has an arrangement. And if you agree, all of your brother's debts will be discharged." I couldn't believe it. What does she want from me? Carter straightened his cuffs. She wants you to come back." I almost laughed. Are you serious?" He nodded. She really appreciates you." I clenched my fists. I tell her I'd rather die in a ditch than go back. Carter sighed. "That's your choice. But think about your brother." He turned and walked away, and I was left standing there, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I sat down on the bed and covered my face with my hands. Jack was silent. He was also trying to realize what had just happened. Bobby?" I looked up. A what? What? He swallowed his saliva. What are you going to do? I shook my head. I don't know yet. Jack shivered. If you don't agree at him, look, they're coming for you. I know they will. He looked away. I clenched my fists. Damn Linda. If she's got me trapped. If I refused, Jack would get hurt. If I said yes, I'd be in her hands again. I couldn't win. But I could change the rules. I stood up and took the envelope Carter had left. I will find out what she's up to. And Jack was on alert. How? I smiled. I will play by her rules, but only to destroy it. I walked out of the hospital, clutching the envelope Carter had left in my hands. The air was heavy, as if before a storm. I didn't know what was inside. And to be honest, I was afraid to find out. Everything that was happening did not fit in my head. Linda was playing some kind of bizarre game, and I was the main figure in it. I was being pushed into a trap, manipulated, forced to make a choice that had no win-win. But I didn't want to be a victim anymore. I decided that even if I had to lose, I would take her with me. I got in the car, took a deep breath, and tore the edge of the paper. Inside was a document. I ran my eyes over the lines and I felt hot. It was a contract. Financial compensation and partnership agreement. Linda's name was not on it. Instead, it was signed by someone else. William Carter. What did that mean? I flipped through the pages, trying to figure it out. It said that if I agreed to go back to Linda, Carter would pay off Jack's debts, and in return I give him half of the shares in my company. I felt the blood rush to my head. There it was. Linda didn't just want me back. She wanted to destroy me completely. I gritted my teeth. This wasn't a game. This was war. Not only was Linda trying to break me, she was going to make me pay for it. Take my company, my future. And worst of all, she made it so that I had to give her everything. If I agree, she gets control of my life. If not, Jack loses everything. I grabbed the document and squeezed it so hard that the paper crunched. My hands were shaking with anger. I imagined Linda sitting in her luxurious mansion right now, drinking expensive wine and laughing. How sure she was that she had me cornered, that I was hopeless. But I haven't lost yet. If she plays dirty, I can play dirty too. I'm going to play this game in reverse. I put the paperwork down and started the car. If Linda wants to trap me, I will pretend to be caught. I will not refuse her. I will say yes, but only to get close enough to strike back. If she wants to destroy me, I will do it first. I will dial her number. I'll listen to how happy she'll be when she hears my answer. And then I'll make her pay for everything. I pressed the call button. The answer was almost instantaneous. Her voice was calm, even joyful. Richard, I knew you were a smart man. I smiled even though I was raging inside. We must meet. In a grate. Her voice became gentler, even playful. Tomorrow at 7 at my favorite restaurant. It's a deal. I pressed, and call, and clutched the phone in my hand. She thinks she's won. But this is not the end. It was just the beginning. The next evening, I stood in front of the restaurant where I was supposed to meet Linda. A luxurious facade, warm yellow light from the windows, expensive cars at the entrance. She had chosen this place for a reason. Linda has always loved power, and here she felt like a queen. But today I had to dethrone her. I took a deep breath and crossed the threshold. The waiter led me to a private table by the panoramic window. Linda was already waiting. A glass of wine in her hand, her hair perfectly styled, a smile that used to drive me crazy. I stopped looking at her. How could she act as if nothing had happened? Like she hadn't ruined my life. Richard. Her voice was warm, almost gentle, so I didn't move. Why did you do that? She sighed. If you're talking about Jack, it was just business. My fists clenched. Or what about betrayal? Is that business too? She didn't flinch. It was a mistake. I smiled, but not happily. A mistake. Yes, it was. Uru, and I want to correct it. I sat down slowly, keeping my eyes on her. How? She leaned closer, her voice softer. I want you to come back. I almost laughed. Why would I do that? But she took a sip of wine and looked me straight in the eye. Or because I love you. My breath caught in my throat. She said it so easily, so naturally. But her eyes remained cold. It was a game. If you love me, why did you betray me? Or she shook her head. It was a mistake, stupid. Jack was just a comfort. But you're the one in charge. She touched my arm. I felt disgusted. I took my hand away. What do you suggest? She smiled. Well, start over. I shook my head. What about Carter? Linda pretended not to understand. What about him? He wants half of my company. She sighed. It's just a formality. A formality? I clenched my jaw. And how would that look? And then I come back to you, give you half my business, and then what? Her smile grew wider. And then we'll be happy. I pot a choice. I could throw the whole truth in her face, reveal her game, and leave, slamming the door. Or I could walk further into her trap to find out what she was really up to. I nodded slowly. Okay. Linda raised her eyebrows in surprise. You're willing to do this? I sighed as if in surrender. Yes. Her eyes sparkled. Oh, I knew you couldn't do it without me. I smiled. You'll see about that. I'm coming back. But not to be with her. I'm coming back to destroy her. I'm coming back to her house. The very house I was kicked out of. The door opened and I stepped onto the familiar floor. Everything was just like before. The same furniture, the same paintings on the walls, the same smell of Linda's expensive perfume. But the feeling was different. It was no longer my fortress. It was a cage. And I entered it voluntarily. Linda raised a glass of wine, smiling as if nothing had happened. To a new beginning. I nodded and touched the glass with my own. The wine was tart. Like life itself. How are you feeling? She asked. I looked at her. When I was younger, that smile used to drive me crazy. Now it only annoyed me. I took a sip and leaned back. I'm still wondering if I did the right thing. She leaned closer. Don't worry, you won't regret it. But I already was. Not because of the decision to go back, but because I had ever believed in her in the first place. The next morning I woke up before Linda did. I went into the office that had once been mine. Now everything there belonged to her. I opened the drawers, flipping through the documents. I was looking for something that could help me, and I found it. An envelope. Winna, my name was written on it. When I opened it, I saw a sheet filled with small handwriting. It was a letter from Jack. I took a breath and started reading. Richard, if you're reading this, it means that everything went wrong. Unada. I felt cold inside. Linda made me take out a loan. She said it was temporary, that you would help. But she was lying. I continued to read, my hands shaking. She knew Carter wanted your business. She was playing both sides from the beginning. And I was just a tool to trap you. I clutched the letter until my fingers turned white. I'm sorry, brother. I thought I could get out of it. But she has me in her grip. If you can still change something, run. Run before it's too late. I sat in my office and looked at the letter. The game was over. I could take 2 steps. The first was to leave right now, while I still had the chance. Forget about Linda, Jack, the company. Start from scratch. The second was to stay, and end this once and for all. I slowly raised my head. I heard movement outside the bedroom door. Linda was awake. I slipped the letter into my pocket. My choice was made. I would no longer be her victim. I would become her judge.